Okay, girls, I'm going to go through the last bit of Book 9 of the Odyssey, lines 503 to 618. I broke it into 4 different parts, and you can slowly go through it looking at your notes and your reading. All right, he sent us into the open then, close by. I dropped and rolled clear of the ram's belly, going this way and that to untie the men. With many glances back, we rounded up his fat, stiff-legged sheep to take aboard, and drove them down to where the good ship lay. We saw, as we came near, our fellows' faces shining. Then we saw them turn to grief, tallying those who had not fled from death. Okay, so important part here is, as Odysseus is sending his men through the cave opening, going past Polyphemus, remember they are underneath the sheep. So as they come out, they drop and roll clear from the ram's bellies. Okay, and this is Odysseus coming out, and he is untying his men from under all the sheep. Okay, they are going to be running to the ship. Okay, to where the good ship lay. Some of the men realize when they see our faces that other men are not making it back alive. Remember, the Cyclops ate at least 4 to 6 men who were in that cave during that time. All right, so let's close this number 1 out. It was a short one, and we'll go into the second book. Okay, so let's look at this one. This is the next piece. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to go through it with the highlighter and highlight important sections. All right, so in the night cave, you never linger so. Okay, so now I'm going to bring the next part. I hushed them, jerking head and eyebrows up, in a low voice told them, "Load this herd, move fast, and put the ship's head toward the breakers." They all pitched in at loading, then embarked and struck their oars out to sea. Far out, as far offshore as shouted words would carry, I sent back a few to the adversary. "O Cyclops, would you feast on my companions? Puny am I in the caveman's hands? How do you like the beating we gave you? You damned cannibal, eater of guests under your roof, Zeus and the gods have paid you." The blind thing, in his doubled fury, broke a hilltop in his hands and heaved it after us. Ahead of our black prow it struck and sank, helmeted in a spuming geyser, a giant wave that washed the ship's stern foremost back to shore. I got the longest boat hook out and stood fending us off, with furious nods to all who put their backs into a racing stroke. "Row, row, or perish!" So the long oars bent, kicking the foam sternward, making head until we drew away, and twice as far. Okay, so what you have here is the escape. Okay, so you have Odysseus speaking, telling them what to do up here in the front, right? Row toward the breakers. Row. But what does Odysseus do you notice? It says, I sent back a few words to the adversary, his enemy, Polyphemus. That is what he says right here. Can you believe it? He talks about the beating that he gave the Cyclops, right? He poked his eye out. They escaped, even though he's huge and they're small. And he's laughing at him. He's saying Zeus and the gods have paid you for your inhospitality and your terrible behavior. So here, in this part down here, we have Polyphemus, in his anger, paying back the words of Odysseus. He takes out hilltops and breaks them in his hand. Odysseus is telling the men to row or perish right here. Right? They need to get away off of the Cyclops Island, back to the side island, the nearby island, where all of the rest of his men are waiting for him. Okay, so let's move this. We'll put this back over here. And then we'll get this one, bring it to the front. and look at these words. Okay, I'll pick up the yellow again, make it a little bit bigger. I'll make it yellow, and we'll look. All right. Now, when I cupped my hands, I heard the crew in low voices protesting. God's sake, Captain, why bait the beast again? Let him alone. That tidal wave he made on the first throw all but beached us. All but stove us in. Give him our bearing with your trumpeting. He'll get the range and lob a boulder. Aye, he'll smash our timbers and our heads together. I would not heed them in my glorying spirit, but let the anger flare and yelled, Cyclops, if ever mortal man inquire how you were put to shame and blinded, tell him Odysseus, raider of cities, took your eye, Laertes' son, whose home is on Ithaca. And at this he gave a mighty sob and rumbled, Now comes the weird upon me spoken of old. A wizard, the grand and wondrous, lived here, Telemachus, son of Eurymachus. Great length of days he had in wizardry among the Cyclopses. And these things he foretold for time to come. My great eye lost, and at Odysseus' hand. I always had in mind some giant, armed in giant force, would come against me here. But you, small, pitiful, and twiggy, you put me down with wine, you blinded me? Come back, Odysseus. I'll treat you well, praying the god of earthquake to befriend you. His son I am. And for he, by his avowal, fathered me, and if he will, he may heal me of this black wound. He, and no other, of all the happy gods or mortal men. Few words I shouted in reply to him. If I could take your life, I would, and take your time away, and hurl you down to hell. The god of earthquake could not hear you there. Okay, so let's go back and look over it. So here we have the men protesting, right? Odysseus is hollering from his ship. The men are protesting to be quiet. Remember, they took the eye of Polyphemus, but he can still hear them. Think of it as like if you play Marco Polo in a pool. Your friend is supposed to have her eyes shut, but she can still try and find you by listening, splashing or listening. So the men all here are telling him to be quiet, because if we're quiet, he can't hear us, and he can't lob his boulders at our ship. This is the major part right here. Notice, this is where Odysseus reveals himself. Before this, Polyphemus thought his name was Nobody. Nobody blinded me. Nobody hurt me. Now, Odysseus tells him, Odysseus, raider of cities, took your eye, Laertes' son, whose home is on Ithaca. Why do you think he did that? That's a question we'll deal with in class. Now over here, this is where the Cyclops Polyphemus has a moment of recollection. He says to himself, wait a minute, your name is Odysseus? I was foretold by a wizard, Telemachus, who lived on this island, that this would happen to me. He told me and Odysseus would do these things. But I thought this Odysseus would be a giant with giant force, coming here with arms to take me down, not some puny man. I didn't believe. He tells him, I am the son of Poseidon, and you will pay for what you have done. Then, of course, Odysseus, who is confident, as usual, says, I doubt it. He says, I would take your life and send you to hell if I could. The god of earthquake can't help you. Think back now. Think back to the grudge we knew about. Poseidon has a grudge against Odysseus. This is how he knows. This is how he knows that Odysseus blinded his son, because Odysseus tells him his name. Even though he was clear and away and rowing back to the island, he tells him his name. Okay, let's do this last part here. Let's bring this to the front. We'll take this last section, bring it up here. We have Odysseus. Okay, and again, it's kind of cut off and it starts, but we'll go. Toward the star of skies and prayed Poseidon. Oh, hear me, Lord, blue girdler of the islands. If I am thine indeed, and thou art father, grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, never see his home. Laertes' son, who kept his halls on Ithaca, should destiny attend that he shall see his roof again among his family in his fatherland, far be that day, and dark the years between. Let him lose all companions, and return home under strange sail to the bitter days at home. In these words he prayed, and the gods heard him. Now he laid hands upon a bigger stone and wheeled around Titanic for the cast, to let it fly in the black prowed vessel's track. But it fell short, just aft the steering oar, and whelming sea rose giant above the stone to bear us onward toward the island. There, as we ran, we saw the squadron waiting, the trim ships drawn up side by side, and all our troubled friends who waited looking seaward. We beached her, grinding keel in the soft sand, and waded in ourselves to the sandy beach. Then we unloaded all the Cyclops' flock to make division, share and share alike. Only my fighters vowed that my ram, the prize of all, should go to me. I slew him by the seaside and burnt his long thigh bones to Zeus beyond the storm cloud, Cronos' son, who rules the world. But Zeus disdained my offering. Destruction for my ships he had in store, and death for those who sailed them, my companions. Now all day long until the sun went down, we made our feast on mutton and sweet wine. Till after the sunset in the gathering dark, we went to sleep above the wash of ripples. When the young dawn with fingertips of rose touched the world, I roused the men, gave orders to man the ships, cast off the mooring lines, and filing in to sit beside the rowlocks, oarsmen in line dipped oars in the gray sea. So we moved out, sad in the vast offing, having our precious lives, but not our friends. Okay, so let's go back and review this. This is Polyphemus. This is him praying to his father, Lord Poseidon, and he's asking for things. He wants Odysseus to be punished. So he says, if indeed you are my father, grant, make my wish come true, that Odysseus never see his homeland on Ithaca ever again. But, he says, should destiny intend that he shall see his roof again, far be that day, and dark be the years between. Let him lose all companions and return under strange sail to bitter days at home. All right, a few things. We know that he's destined to go to Ithaca, but we also know that it's arduous and long, far be that day, and dark the years between, that Odysseus gets home. Let him lose all his companions. We also know that all of his men die and he lands on Calypso's island alone. Now this part here, under strange sail to bitter days at home, we'll talk more about later. All right, looking on here, we're talking about how they are leaving the island on the ship. All right, so over here, they get back to the nearby island. They make division here of their winnings, things they stole, the rams and sheep. Here, Odysseus tries to make peace with Zeus, and it doesn't seem to work. He knows that destruction is going to be in his future. And then, as usual, there's sleep, and then dawn bringing the next day. The men get on their ship to leave the nearby island of Calypso, moving on with their journey, hoping for the best. We have our lives, but our friends are dead. Okay, so you can listen to this more than once if you need to. You can go back and listen to parts of it if you need to. Otherwise, it's here for you, taking it apart piece by piece, the end of Book 9.